hiccuping is another sign of parasites as well, because you have worms that are crawling in and around those that duct, triggering a reaction. But let me get back to the article. Puppies too are taught to eat dog grass to entangle their stomach ascaris, the parasite, and spit them up. But humans, with all their intelligence, seem to be doing nothing to keep their parasitism in check. Of course, there's a natural intelligence that will help us deal with these things. That, of course, is encoded within our bodies. The human body is just, the more I learn about it, the more I realize what a brilliant, I'm just more and more amazed by the Creator's, the Most High Yahawah's ways, and this body is, it's just like blown away. But humans with all their intelligence seem to be doing nothing. Well, this is by design. It always, before I even got that far into the truth, health was something that I had spent a lot of time researching. And the more you get into it, the more you realize the core of all these problems is a polluted environment, whether that's inside or outside the body, but toxins, and then parasites. And the parasites are a result of these toxins. Ultimately, it's sin, as I've come to understand through the Spirit, but it's not by design. But it is by design that there's just so little knowledge about them today. If you go back hundreds of years ago and look at medical literature, and I'll have to do a lesson on this, but I encourage you to do your own research, you'll find that this was a very well-known parasite, and their detrimental effect on the human body was a very well understood phenomenon. But it's by design that it's been stripped from, I'll say, collective consciousness, and certainly Western medicine today, because it keeps people in a chronically sick condition, which is, of course, very profitable. But I'm going to take it a step further, that it goes much deeper than profits. It goes into spiritual wickedness. If you're filled with these parasites, you cannot have a connection with the Most High. We can't. Or at the best, a very limited and reduced one. I suppose that's a better way to say it, because these are conduits by which we become possessed. And I'm going to posit that it's not, what I'm not saying is you're possessed and you're kind of flailing around and your head's spinning around and all of that movie crap. A lot of that is it's just a very unhelpful way of thinking about it. Perhaps in maybe some of the most extreme cases you can get that, but in a much more mundane, boring way, perhaps almost imperceptible way, people are affected by these millions of parasites that are in their body through chemical secretions. And again, this all facilitates spiritual demonic activity within our bodies. It may not have full control over you, and in most cases it won't, but it will have enough to influence you and your decisions. Absolutely. The following paragraph says, the synchrometer shows that we all, from early childhood, harbor Ascaris eggs, that's roundworm, and larvae, the young hatchlings that go through molts. These tiny wormlets, too small to see, give us seizures, right, as we talked about before, with pork tapeworms, but these do it too, eczema, the common cold, and our childhood diseases. Gosh, editing here. Right, all of the problems with our human body. Parasites even live in other parasites, right, which compounds the difficulty in getting rid of them. They have their own bacteria and viruses. The bacteria themselves have viruses, and at least one bacterium common, Salmonella, has prions. I don't know what that means. Ascaris brings us chickenpox and mumps, herpes 1 and 2, whatever that says, viruses, adenovirus, a common cold, whatever this is, I'm not going to bother pronouncing it, that causes night sweats. We didn't notice these connections in the past because the diseases are commonplace in the parasites, so tiny and quiet. So I'm going to posit this and say this through the Spirit. When you are going through these diseases as a kid, again, we looked up that word before, and they're generally one-time things, at that point, these parasites are being introduced into your body, and they're taking, not only have they been introduced, but they're taking hold within the body. They're creating a stronghold, and then you live with that stronghold in your body for the rest of your life unless you get rid of it. But generally, you don't. The more and more I research into this, the more I realize that you just have to throw out all of your previous knowledge and everything that you've kind of been taught as common knowledge. It almost all has to go out the window because that's not the story of what's happening. Just reading this now makes me think that, and I've noticed as I'm detoxing and removing things, you get the diseases when you're acquiring all of these problems, but your body is able to, for lack of a better word, section it off or at least quarantine it, but it doesn't fully solve the issue or remove it. In this case, it's parasites. But again, the same goes for toxins as well. When your body is very, very weak in a certain area or saturated, it loses its ability to suppress whatever the problem is. So then you'll have the disease. And a third way that the disease comes through is when you're expelling all of this too. And I've noticed that as I'm detoxing, I go through all of these, different types of symptoms depending on what is being detoxed and where in the body it's being detoxed from. That's where the symptoms occur. And it's things like rashes, flu-like, cold-like symptoms, so on and so forth. And again, without going too far into that area, but it's something that popped in my head that's very interesting. A lot to think about as what I had just said and as it relates to vaccines and the purpose of vaccines, but I think that's a topic for another time. Next paragraph. It takes a special astuteness to be suspicious of commonplace things. Ancient and primitive societies had special astuteness. Why did the Hebrew nation, I didn't know this was in here, why did the Hebrew nation ban pork in the diet? Well, I talked about this previously. Ultimately, it's a commandment of the Most High, but we can perhaps understand why it's not good for us to eat pork. Did they notice that herdsmen of swine often had epilepsy, skin disease, and other health problems? Again, this is kind of the wrong question to ask. The Hebrew nation didn't ban pork. This was a commandment from the Heavenly Father. Modern American citizens have some astuteness too, having recognized that smoking cigarettes often leads to lung cancer. Strongyloids bring us migraine headaches and maybe our addiction as well as the very beginning of all tumors, as we will see. Which problem they bring depends on where they colonize and what we, the hosts, are eating. Right, so depending on where you have your discomfort, That's what we call in today's sort of modern world, that's the disease. But really, all you're saying is, this is the area in which I'm having problems in my body. This concept of the disease, like, that's not the actual underlying problem. It's just telling you what the symptoms are. So where the symptoms are in the body, that's what you call the disease. But the underlying problem, regardless of where it is in the body, is parasites and toxins. The body is, again, as I said before, amazing. It can heal itself. It can regrow limbs, do all of these really incredible things if it's cleared of parasites and toxins. Gosh, there's so much more I want to say on that. But again, I don't want to keep getting too far off the article. So, and I had these as a kid. I had horrible migraines as a kid. I was always sick. And then all of a sudden it reached a point where I stopped getting sick anymore. And I stopped having migraines. And I'm going to say that at that point, I can't speak for other people, but probably exactly the same, these had taken up at least some degree of a stronghold within my body, the brain and other places. Now, it certainly never got to the point where, and I think this is virtually all cases, almost all cases of people, where you're not having, you're not going to be having epilepsy and, failing your arms and spinning your head around. Let me rephrase. It hasn't gotten to the point or the level of stronghold or infestation that I myself, and I think in most cases of people, are having epileptic seizures, but there's a stronghold there nonetheless that needs to be removed for optimal functioning. Anyway, let me read this again. Strongyloids bring us migraine headaches and maybe our addictions, as well as the very beginning of all tumors, as we will see. Right, so us craving certain types of foods is related to these strongyloids setting up shop in our brains, but really it's parasites all over the body. I noticed that as I began detoxing and destroying a lot of these parasites in my body, all of these cravings went away, but also cravings to do wickedness, however minor. I think it's important to note that. So, I hate to say it, but teasing people is one such craving. Watching horror movies or playing violent video games or anything that's going to be toxic to our spirit that our ancestors were 100% not doing. They weren't enjoying killing and death. They weren't enjoying irritating each other. Let me get an example of that, so that it's not just me speaking, but there's scriptural basis. Proverbs 27:14. He that blesseth his friend with a loud voice, rising early in the morning, it shall be counted a curse to him. Right, because the person that's doing this, they're annoying and irritating their friend. And this is a sin, and it may seem like this is a very light form, or it's perhaps not even worthy of being mentioned, but this is a form of wickedness, disturbing people, kind of troubling them in some way, irritating or teasing them to get a reaction out of them, to get some kind of like internal jump or kick